Good afternoon, everyone. I'm John Ravitz, the Executive Vice President and Chief Operating Officer for the Business Council of Westchester. I want to welcome everyone to the Business Council's Resource Center featured webinar. This is the third in a series that Ron Kamen has put together for the Business Council of Westchester in his Clean Energy series. Today's topic is saving money with ground sources. We want to thank our sponsors, Earthkind Energy, and our co-sponsors, Atlantic Westchester, NYSERDA, Sunrise Solar, Pell Wealth Partners, Brightcore, and ZBF Geothermal. Before I introduce Ron, I think it's important that people know the work that he's done and his background, because he came to us as he knows that the changing energy landscape in Westchester County is one of our top priorities. And we wanted to continue, as we've gone through the pandemic, to give out as much information as possible. So Ron is the founder and CEO of Earthkind Energy Consulting. It's a 20-year consulting firm that represents businesses, governments, communities, and non-for-profits in clean energy transformation that saves them money and reduces their carbon footprints. His clients have included the World Bank, the U.S. military, Fortune 1000 corporations, schools and colleges, municipalities, and government agencies and authorities. Ron's Clean Power Consulting has produced dramatic improvements that annually save his clients hundreds of millions of dollars and eliminate megatons of carbon. This is the third of a sixth series of programming that Ron has put together. The feedback that we have received from our members has been tremendous. And Ron, we can't thank you enough for the hard work that you've put in. And I'm going to turn it over to you to introduce your panel.
Great. Thank you so much, John. Can everybody see the slide? Shake your head, a couple of you. Yes? Good? We're good. Great. Thank you, everybody, for coming. John, thank you to you, Marsha, Amanda, the Business Council, Yvette, and everybody that works there. Folks, in 3 decades of working clean energy, I've worked with hundreds of business organizations and councils across the country, and I can honestly say that the Business Council of Westchester by far is the best organization that I have seen. They are the most effective, most engaged, most supportive of their members, and I'll tell you, if you live, work, do business, or want to do business in Westchester, you should absolutely become a member of the council. Okay, so today, as John said, it is the second deep dive, the third in the series where we had an overview and then 2 additional, this is the third one now, the second deep dive into heating and cooling in particular, and into geothermal. And we're going to talk about how you can save money with these technologies, that's the piece, and how you can have a dramatic impact on carbon. And to start out, the first question that we ask you to think about and to put together your number is how much are you spending on energy? And energy in particular is electricity, it's heating and cooling, and it's your gas and maintenance and your transportation fuels, your transportation fuels. And when you take a look at those 3 energy sectors, what you find inevitably is that there's at least a 10% savings in each of those sectors. When you start doing the synergies of all 3 sectors, you find that there's dramatic potential savings, 30% or even higher at times. When you look at New York State, we've identified in the past there's $61 billion collectively that we're spending on energy. Most of that goes out of the state. And when we take a look and are concerned about our carbon footprints, we find that energy is 86% of the carbon that we generate. And again, it's in all 3 sectors. Thankfully, New York State has a very aggressive and progressive program to deal with that. There are millions and actually billions of dollars worth of incentives to help you make this transition. That's what the panel today will be talking about, specifically on the clean heating and cooling sectors, with both NYSERDA and Con Ed talking about the incentives that are available there. And we're going to have a deep dive into some examples of people who have done it already. Not to let go, though, the other pieces we'll be touching on will be solar next week, where there's a tremendous amount of money that's available for solar, and we'll talk about that later. And then clean transportation will be the following week, where currently there's $650 million worth of incentives. But last week there was the announcement of another $750 million to help you make the transition with electric vehicle charging stations throughout the state. So if you're interested in that, in 2 weeks, you'll have the opportunity to take a deep dive into those two sectors. And the third sector that we'll be talking about is investing, and we'll hit on that later. Just to give you a sense, again, an overview, you can do this if you have capital, if you could take the tax credits with the incentives of both the cash grants and the tax benefits. You have a return on investment of at least 10%, up to 30% in most times, or even further. If you have no capital or you don't have the tax appetite, there's the ability to do this with third-party financing. So you don't lay out a dime, you just save money from day one, and you will be hearing about part of that model with geothermal heating and cooling later in a moment too. One thing to be aware of just also is any of you that are interested in taking a deep dive and looking at what you're spending and how you might be able to reduce your costs, we're running a sweepstakes specifically just for business council people who view this webinar. So either you're attendees and registered, or if you watch this later and want to sign up, you can still register for the sweepstakes. The sweepstakes is available for your home, for your workplace, or to a designated nonprofit if you win. That deep dive, there's more information about it, but specifically we look at all three sectors of energy, identify what you're spending now and how you can reduce those costs, and lay out a customized plan for you to reach net zero, to reduce your carbon footprint while saving yourself money. And that's a hidden website, earthkindenergy.com/sweepstakes. This recording will be available so you can take a look at that later too. But I'm going to ask everyone, if you would, before we start, to please take a deep breath and to hold it for 20 seconds of silence in memory of all those who took their last breath in 2020 this year. Thank you. We and the whole world have just come through and are still in the midst of this pandemic. It's been a wake-up call about the fragility of all our lives and the reality of what we're facing as humanity across the world, but in our communities. Clean energy is central to civilization. It's central to what we need to do to be able to survive as a species. And it's key to not just the environment and the climate, but to the economy and jobs, and also economic and social and environmental justice. So with that in mind, the good news that you should realize is that nature provides over 1,000 times more energy than we need. There's a little video about this, a 2-minute animation, and I'll put it in the chat so you can click on it later, but it's a really fascinating insight into where energy is, how much we have left, and what nature can provide us. The better news is that we have the technology now to harness these four elements. The human innovation that we've put into place has made this so that, yes, there's still some challenges about doing everything in every specific opportunity, but there are tremendous opportunities for electricity, heating, cooling, and transportation now that can basically address this issue very effectively. And the best news is that across the board, there's the opportunity that we can also save money doing it. Along the lines of the last dive, we talked about a technology that's now here, that's being promoted and implemented by Atlantic Westchester, one of the sponsors of this series. This needlepoint bipolar ionization has a number of different factors. Not only is it great at knocking down COVID and other pathogens, but in addition, there's a way to save energy and money doing it. If you know Bud Hammer and Atlantic Westchester and Kathy Hoffman, they have this technology installed in their home and workplaces, and it's an excellent technology. If you want to find out about it, there's a lot of good technologies out there, but this is by far one of the best that's out there for many different reasons. So take a look at that if you're concerned and are looking at your HVAC systems as a way of dealing with the pathogens. But now I'm going to turn it over to Brightcore and Geothermal. We're going to take a deep dive into geothermal. The most efficient HVAC solution, heating, ventilation, and air conditioning solution, is right under your feet. So, Dave, if you would be so kind, Dave Hermanton, Vice President of Engineering for Brightcore.
Thanks a lot, Ron. Next slide. Yeah, as Ron said, my name is Dave Hermanton. I'm Vice President Engineering at Brightcore Energy. A little bit about what we do as a company before we get into talking specifics about geothermal. We're a clean energy solution company that provides end-to-end solutions. And we work in large solar, community solar, large LED lighting retrofits, EV charging and energy storage. And what's really special about our company is that we provide the capital to implement these projects, and we set up agreements that, although they provide zero investment from building owners, there's savings from day one. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that, how it relates to our geothermal offering, geothermal as a service. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide. Ron, can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm going through it. Are you not seeing this? Whoops. Oh, there we go. I'm so sorry. Apparently it stopped sharing for some reason. Sorry about that, Dave.
Oh, no problem. I'm going to pause my timer.
So we make buildings perform better. Is this good now?
Yeah. So a little bit about myself. As I said, I'm VP of Engineering over at Brightcore Energy. My specialty is geothermal. I've been working in, I guess, the geothermal space for a bit over 15 years now. In the New York area, up through New England. I've been really fortunate to have worked on some of the big projects in the New York City area. I'm going to touch on those a little later in the presentation. Next slide. So first, what is geothermal? There are a lot of common misconceptions. We're now talking about tapping into hot molten rock that's used to turn electric turbines, create electricity. We're talking about ground source energy. And the application for this is to operate HVAC systems, either water to air heat pumps, water to water heat pumps, or reversible chillers that are used to condition buildings. Next slide. I put this slide in here specifically because I've been involved in this business for a long time. And when the gas constraints were announced in the Westchester area, that there was a lot of, I guess, fear and I guess, uncertainty and blowback from the developer community. And one of the things that came up was that there are developers in the area that had problems with geothermal systems. And I know that firsthand. Some of the work that I've done has been troubleshooting and repairing geothermal systems. And I can tell you in Westchester County, predominantly where most of these problems were with standing column well systems. It's a type of geosystem that uses groundwater. And if your groundwater is poor quality, which is most often the case in Westchester, you're pulling it into your building and you're causing problems in your building. But that's not what we're talking about. Can we go to the next slide? We're talking about closed loop geothermal systems and modern closed loop geothermal systems, as I like to refer to them, don't build systems that use groundwater anymore. The water that is circulated through these systems is in a closed piping system, and it rejects heat into the ground in the summertime and it extracts energy and heat out of the ground in the wintertime. And that makes for a super efficient type of system. I don't want to knock air source systems or VRF systems. I think they're great, but I like to say that geothermal systems are better. And that's particularly evident in the wintertime. When you're heating a building with a geothermal system, when it's 10, 15 degrees out, you're pulling 10, 15 degree air into your air source system. Geosystems are pulling in 50-degree water. So that helps them operate far more efficiently. And our next presenter, Zach, is going to talk a little bit about how much more efficiently, so I won't go into that. But one of the great things about geosystems is there are no condensing units outside that are affected by the weather. Our equipment is underground, so they last a very long time. Okay, go to the next slide. So here I put this slide in the deck. It's common when I talk to a developer or a project design team, they ask a lot of questions, and a lot of them are common questions. One is, what happens if a pipe fails? We're very experienced and skilled at designing these systems, and also have rigorous testing protocol in place that we make sure that systems work right from day one. But if a pipe fails, we can get to our pipes by isolating them in manifolds in the building, and we can patch and repair pipes just like any other pipe, a plumbing pipe that might be damaged. The piping is HDPE. It's warranted for 50 years. It's expected to last more than 100 years. And we're very familiar with these systems. I'm going to talk a bit about our Geothermal as a Service offering that, I guess, helps de-risk these projects. Next slide. So our Geothermal as a Service, we design, build, own, operate, and maintain the ground portion of the project. So what this does is, it means that that the risk is taken away from the mechanical designer or the architect. Yes, we're sharing all of our information in a very transparent way. And also, Geo as a Service is a PPA type of agreement that requires $0 up front from the developer. Can I go to the next slide, please? So yeah, we like to get involved very early in the process. We're very used to working with A&E teams. We share all our intellectual capital, very transparent, so everybody feels comfortable about what we're proposing. We provide all the financial capital to install these systems. And we have a 30-year PPA style agreement, which greatly reduces the cost. So I'm going to show you an example of a project that we're working on with a local developer and see how that pans out financially. Next slide. So yeah, we're reducing upfront cost, we're reducing energy costs, and we're reducing maintenance costs with these systems. Next slide. Additional benefits are reducing the amount of equipment that goes onto the roof of a building. So condensing units or cooling towers, those are going to be gone and free up open space for amenities or solar panels on a building. Next slide. This is the example I mentioned. We're talking to a developer about a project that they're developing in Yonkers. It's a 235,000 square foot mixed use, predominantly multifamily housing and commercial. They're affected by the natural gas constraints. Their design included PTAC units, which anyone that knows what PTAC units are, they're very inexpensive. Pretty much the cheapest way that you can heat and cool a space in a building. They're very inefficient, and they have a short useful life, about 15 years. So we took a look at our plans, and we designed a geothermal system with high efficiency, high quality geothermal heat pumps. Cost more upfront for the building work, $1 million more. But with Con Ed's incentives and the federal tax credit that's available for geothermal, that reduced the capital cost by $1.8 million, I mean, very significantly. So that actually saves, there's a CapEx savings to the developer of $800,000. When you look at the operating costs, the PTACs are very inefficient. Our models show that they're going to use $650,000 worth of electricity a year. The Geo is super efficient. That brings the energy use down to $200K a year. Our Geothermal as a Service fee is $290, and that pays for our $3.5 million investment in the ground loop and monitoring and ownership of the system. So when that's added to the operating expense, there's still an annual energy savings that's very significant, $160,000. And this is realized by the tenants of the space. And this building is an LMI building. So that's a giant plus. And we're going to do this with no impact to the construction timeframe using innovative installation technologies. Can I go to the next slide, please? So yeah, trying to squeeze 10 minutes of stuff into a 5-minute sack. I just wanted to show some projects that, we were involved in. Everyone knows what building that is on the left. When people tell me they have a challenging project or a retrofit project and they don't think that geothermal is a fit, I like to tell them I beg to differ. On the upper right, that's on Roosevelt Island. It's the Cornell Bloomberg building, a very innovative type of geothermal system installed on that site. And in the lower right-hand corner is a building that Zach's going to talk about. That is the Beach Green 2 building in Queens, New York, where Zach and I worked together, and we built an awesome LMI housing project, or designed and built it for L&M developers. Next slide. So yeah, summarizing, we are bringing to the marketplace efficiency, long operational life of HVAC equipment, de-risking projects, and allowing building owners to take advantage of great incentives that we're going to talk more about. Just wrapping up, Ron said, hey, what's the call to action for our business? And I'd say call to action is call us. We like to talk to you more about this. There's a lot of information to share. We provide free project assessments, and we have a lot of experience in this. We can do it very quickly and concisely. We would like to talk to you and your A&E team. We offer lunch and learns where we figured out during the COVID era that we can provide Grubhub lunch cards to people, so we can actually have a lunch and learn together via Zoom. And yeah, contact us. My email information is here. President of our company is Mr. Mike Richter, and co-CEO Rob Krugel is a financial wizard, and we'd love to talk to you about how we can provide geothermal as a service for your upcoming project. Ron?
Great. Thank you so much there, Dave. Really appreciate it. Excellent overview. Folks, just in terms of terminology, PPA is a power purchase agreement. What that means is that a developer like Brightcore will put in all the equipment. You don't pay them anything for the upfront cost, but you just pay them as the power, or in this case, the heat and cooling is delivered. So it's a way to reduce your upfront cost and grab some savings over time. The fascinating thing to me is you can now drill down under any building, and going down to 500 feet in New York State means that you can carry the heating, cooling, and hot water load for pretty much any building, depending on the design and how well it's designed and how efficient, but up to 25 stories. So just under the footprint of a building, you can go and carry 25 stories with geothermal heating and cooling. And the other piece, just to make mention, is that this piping now is the same piping. It's carbon filament that they use for the natural gas industry. So it's very long lasting, guaranteed for 50 years, will last over 100. And with that, I'm going to pass it over now to Zach from ZBF Geothermal.
All right. Thanks, Ron. Do you want to? Thank you. All right. So there was some formatting issue when the slides got changed from wide format to standard format. So sorry about that. But if you want to go to the next slide, Ron. Yeah. So I'm Zach with ZBF Geothermal. I'm the owner of ZBF Geothermal. We're a design build company that was established in 2012. We saw a need for a company that focused not only on geothermal installations, but design and being able to provide the entire package for our clients. In 2016, we added consulting services and started working on the larger scale projects. Although we always joked around that if someone was building a 50,000 square foot house, is that a residential project or commercial? And then I have the unique insight of being third generation air conditioning and heating. And my grandfather started his company back in the 50s, and believe it or not, was converting people from coal to oil. And then my uncle was oil to gas, but in the 70s, they installed hundreds of geothermal systems during the oil and gas crisis. So since I've started in the industry, I've been involved in installation of over 1,000, heat pumps, ranging from a little 1,200 square foot house to 300,000 plus square foot buildings. Next slide, please. So just quick overview. We're going to talk about why geothermal impacts on a project budget, project economics, and just how we deal with feasibility of a project. Next slide, please. So why geothermal? Next slide, Ron. All right, so I always like this quote. So Beach Green 2, the project that Dave and I worked on together, is an affordable housing passive house project, 117 units. I'll talk about it a little bit more in a second. But each of the apartments costs $10 a month for cooling. If you compare that to a conventional building, it would be $100 to $200 a month for the same apartment. For an LMI client, that's a difference between them providing cooling or not providing cooling. Next slide, please. So just to go over the types of heat pumps and the different options. So once you electrify, you really have an air source heat pump, which are the units shown in this picture. And here they're installed on the side of the building. Most of the time they take up the valuable roof space, and they're noisy and they add some weight. But the main difference is the efficiency. The most efficient units tend to be 14 or so EER and a COP of 3.3. And if you think about these as the gas mileage on your car, it's a linear relationship. The higher the number, the more you save. And just a straight electric resistance heater, say your toaster oven, has a COP of 1. So they're efficient. It's a third of the cost of running just say electric baseboard. But if you go to the next slide, Ron, compared to a ground source heat pump, we have a COP of 5, so we're 50% more efficient. And we have an EER of 30, which is twice as efficient. And it's all powered by the ground loop that could be installed under the building or in the parking lot or in some other space that's available. And the beautiful thing is once it's installed, you don't see anything. You have a little pump in a mechanical room someplace, and the rest of the infrastructure is very similar to what your infrastructure would have otherwise have been in the building. Next slide, please. So just to compare the efficiency of the heat pumps as a visualization, ground source heat pumps, the commercially really the highest efficiency you see is about 30 ER, air source heat pumps about 13, 14, and then PTAX, which a lot of our developers would otherwise use, hydronic PTAX to a boiler in non-gas constrained areas, are somewhere around 8, 9, 10 ER. So you can just see the comparative efficiency. Once you go to geothermal, it's the most efficient system you can get out there. Next slide, please. So passive house construction typically adds about 5% of the cost. I always like to mention that geothermal isn't always free, but it's not as big of a cost impact as everyone imagines. And we always work with our client to try to figure out how to reduce those costs. Next slide, please. All right, next slide. So what really impacts the cost of a system? Geology is probably the biggest one that we see. If you give me a project in Lower Manhattan, it's going to cost more than a project in Westchester or in Queens. And then the depth to bedrock and what's in the ground also affects it. System design. If you want snow melt for the parking lot, that costs more if you want a zone for every bedroom. But the things that would typically drive HVAC costs are the things that would drive a geothermal cost. And then I think the biggest one is the building construction and how the load of the building is being balanced. And I'll show you an example in a second of an exercise. This is a project that's actively being built. The loop field's going under the building. There's 3 buildings going up in this cluster right now, 200 boreholes, all of them under the building. And we were able to design the loop field to be smaller by helping the developer realize that if we put better windows in and better insulation in, the entire project would become that much smaller. So if you go to the next slide, this is the example. So the base building, we estimated that we need roughly 60,000 feet of drilling. Would have ended up being 130, 140 holes just under this one building at a cost of a little under $1.9 million to install the loop field. We were able to have the developer increase the insulation. They did 1 inch of spray foam extra on the exterior walls of the building, and they put triple pane windows in. It added about $250,000 to the construction cost, but it saved $500,000 of loop field cost. The system now is that much more efficient as well, and my loop field temperatures are going to be a lot more moderate. So there's going to be less problems, less longevity issues of the systems. Next slide, John. So Beach Green 2 was New York City's first affordable housing project with geothermal that we know of. Next slide. So I'm just going to go over some high level numbers. Construction costs somewhere in the $1.5 million to $2 million range, 127 apartments, about 500 tenants in the building. And just to visualize it, in the parking lot in the back of the building, we have about 6 miles of pipe in the ground. Next slide, please. $120,000 was about the rebate from PSEG. We estimate the Con Ed incentive will model similar because PSEG and Con Ed use roughly the same formula on a savings per kWh basis. Next slide, please. And again, the $10 a month for air conditioning compared to $100 a month. Next slide. So we always get asked, what makes ZBF different? Why should you call us or someone else? And when you pencil out the numbers, the projects we've involved in residentially and commercially, if we look at, full life cycle, 25-year savings, we have about $185 million of accrued savings for our clients at the end of these projects. We've been involved in 1,000+ systems, and probably the biggest metric to us is that we have repeat developers coming back to us. So we have five projects now that the developers are repeating with us. So what is the process? We do a free desktop feasibility study. Someone calls us up and says, what's involved in this project? And we can give them, we can give you a rough idea of the cost involved. Can it fit? You're building a 50-story building or you're building a 12-story building. The economics, because we also build projects on a certain scale, we can dial in what the construction cost estimates are. We have developers tell us that our numbers are accurate, where they typically throw away engineers' numbers. And then design, we have the ability to lead the design team from the idea to the completion and commissioning of the building. Next slide, Ron. And then just a takeaway would be, if you have any questions, feel free to engage us, feel free to reach out to us. And if you have a potential project, we're happy to do a free desktop feasibility study for your project to discuss if geothermal is a fit for you guys.
Thanks so much, Zach. Really appreciate it. Folks, one thing to keep in mind that is an interesting twist in what you would think. A lot of people say, oh yeah, well, I can't do geothermal because I have rock. And actually, rock is a good thing. It's the sand that becomes very much more problematic and costly to keep drilling and filling in around the sand. So just keep that in mind as you're thinking about opportunities for yourselves and others. And one of the things that I will also say is that if you're doing new construction is pretty clearly, this should be almost a no-brainer, except because of all the different factors that go into it, no matter what your alternative would have been with heating and cooling sources. And then when you're looking at oil heat, this is also a tremendously cost-effective technology for anyone that currently is heating with oil, which is both dirty and still expensive, and will continue to get more so as we start to reach our climate goals. So with that, I'm going to push it over to Scott Smith from NYSERDA, who's going to talk about some of the opportunities and technical support and financial incentives for NYSERDA. So Scott, if you'd be so kind.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Ron. Can you hear me? Great. So, I think Ron mentioned this at the beginning, but New York State and Con Edison, NYSERDA and Con Edison are putting a lot of resources behind clean heating and cooling technologies, including geothermal at the moment. I'm going to introduce Mark in a minute. He's going to talk about their incentives. We're doing lots of things to grow this market. I'm going to talk about some of the things that we're doing to help customers figure out what they want to do, which is one of the roles that we're playing. Hopefully you guys are all excited about working with Dave and Zach. After that great presentation, they certainly know what they're doing. There are a lot of other contractors that you could possibly work with, but they certainly have done a lot of great projects in the area. And I think Zach mentioned that they will do a sort of free desktop audit for you on a project. So that's an opportunity or a way that you can get to this information. If for whatever reason you're not sure if you want to do air source or ground source, or you prefer to work with a third party, we also have a free screening that's available that we've hired a consultant to do free screenings for any customer in Westchester with a building above 10,000 square feet. Click on this link, which is going to be in the slides. We pay for the screening, have a half-an-hour phone call with the consultant. They'll follow up to ask for some additional information about your building, and you'll get an 8 to 10-page report on giving you an idea, a rough idea of the costs and savings. Next slide. And then once you're ready, or if you're ready right now, We can also help with a feasibility study, and I think Zach also talked about doing a feasibility study. It's an important part of any large project. And we will pay for 100% of feasibility studies that are initiated between now and the end of the year. We pay 50% through a program called FlexTech, and then if you actually do the project within 2 years, you can get the other 50% back. You can use a consultant that we have on retainer. We have a number of them, and there are 6 or so that are specifically working in Westchester, or you can bring your own consultant. If you wanted to work with Dave or Zach, for example, you could use them on a project.
Thank you, Scott. Yeah, Scott, unfortunately, your internet connection is having some issues again. We just lost some sound. But folks, again, this will all be recorded. It's all available for you. So the basic bottom line is that there are a lot of resources. And Scott, are you still there? Can you want to just go over this last slide?
Can you hear me, Ron?
I can hear you now. You're back. So.
All right. There was an issue with it wasn't internet this time. It was my speaker, although I've been having internet issues. So thanks for being with me, everybody. So something else that we have that you can take advantage of, we've got a contract with Sustainable Westchester. We're doing some work with them called Heat Smart Westchester. Rachel Carpatella is on the webinar today, and she's available also to kind of help you figure out what you want to do. She can come sit down with you. She can talk about what it is your goals are, what kind of building you're working in, and she can help you figure out what's the right next step for you and help you with that next step. Help you get to a free screening, help you get to a FlexTech feasibility study, or help you get to an installer like Zach or Dave. Her phone number and email, I think, are on this slide. Next slide.
Right on the slide. Yep. Great. Thanks so much, Scott. Thank you. So one of the things that has happened just recently really is that the programs have been transitioning from NYSERDA, these particular programs, to utilities. And as this says, the utilities actually now have and are accessing $450 million worth of incentives to help you make this transition. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mark Brescia from Con Ed to talk a little bit about the Con Edison incentives.
Thanks, Ron. Just a quick point of clarification. It's not that each utility has $450 million. NYSERDA being a state organization has totaled up the tally from all of the utilities. Con Edison does have a nice chunk of that, it's a great number statewide, and it's great to be part of the statewide program. So good afternoon. I am Mark Brescia, the Residential Geothermal Program Manager in the Non-Pipeline Solutions section of Con Edison's Energy Efficiency and Demand Management Department. I appreciate your interest today in learning about how the statewide Clean Heat Program can work in Westchester for a sustainable heating future. The electric utilities have transitioned from NYSERDA, as we just talked about, the heat pump incentives as of April 1st. And today I'll briefly touch on the Category 4 incentive, which is designed for larger projects, traditionally applicable for, say, mixed use or multifamily, as well as commercial buildings. And that's both existing buildings and new construction. These incentives do include geothermal, which is the topic of the discussion today, but are also eligible for collections of air source units such as variable refrigerant flow, known as VRF systems, and both ducted and ductless mini split systems. Geothermal, however, is the highest efficiency of these options and has the lowest electric operating costs of the Category 4 systems, and will also likely yield the highest utility incentive because the energy savings are based on the same baseline, your traditional counterfactual fossil fuel system that you would have replaced that with. If you do have a small business or a low-rise multifamily, or maybe just your own home, and you're interested in geothermal for heating and cooling of that, a specific geothermal incentive of $2,850 per 10,000 BTU per hour of full load heating capacity as certified by AHRI is also available. So this is for the larger incentives, larger projects, but we do have incentives for smaller geothermal systems as well. So any size geothermal system has an incentive through Con Edison. So next slide, please, Ron. When planning your project, it's important to connect with a clean heat participating contractor early in the decision-making process to begin conducting load calculations and potential incentive amounts. When equipment is selected and all costs determined, an application can be submitted and potential you can submit your application after you've got all your costs, and then Con Edison will schedule a site visit as well as an engineering review to take place to confirm the energy savings calculations done by your participating contractor. If you're a contractor who installs HVAC systems and would like to participate in the New York State Clean Heat Program, please visit our additional resources page on this slide. If you're looking at starting an HVAC upgrade and not sure which technology and incentive is the best fit for your project, please visit coned.com/heatpumps. And again, I am just one of a larger team at Con Edison working on the affordable transition to clean heating. And we look forward to answering both general and project-specific questions via email at cleanheat@coned.com. So again, a lot of the incentive amounts that you see here, $150 per MMBTU of annual energy savings, that seems like a small number, but when looking at these projects, as ZBF, Zach mentioned, those numbers really add up, to six-figure values when looking at these larger projects. Again, we're going to work with you through the beginning stages of your project. Please reach out early once you've started calculations to determine the energy savings so that we can work together to confirm all of those numbers. Their Category 4 incentive, again, because this is a multitude of different system types, could qualify for all of the market segments. You traditionally wouldn't think about a VRF system on a single family residential home, but potentially in row homes, attached homes, brownstones, where you don't really have a lot of space available, a VRF unit could actually be the right fit. So, there are different solutions for each. Multifamily, small commercial, office parks, things like that are throughout Westchester are a great fit for these geothermal projects, and the incentives are there to make them really cost effective, both upfront as well as in operating costs long term. I appreciate you taking the time to learn about geothermal systems and Con Edison's incentives, and want to thank the Business Council for having me. Ron, have a great afternoon.
Thanks so much, Mark. So folks, here's the contacts for everybody that's on this, and then also the series sponsors. So if you have any questions, we're all amenable and willing and able and very interested in helping you figure it out. One of the questions that just came up was, what's the difference between a high efficiency gas unit? How does that compare to, let's say, an electric based heater, or then to the air source heat pumps of the ground station? And just to get a sense, the difference is that no matter how efficiently you burn, you're always less than 1. The maximum would be 100%. Electric resistance is at a 1. When you look at air source, you're looking at between 2 and 3 usually. And when you start going into geothermal, you're looking at 4 to 5. So you can be 400 to 500% more efficient with a geothermal system, twice 200 to 300% or so with an air source system compared to the most efficient burning system, whether that's gas or oil. One of the other questions that I'd like to ask folks to discuss is sort of, if you've got a smaller project, at what point does it make sense to go to BrightCore or ZBF versus going to FlexTech versus going to starting out at square one with Sustainable Westchester and Rachel? Anybody want to comment on that?
Is my audio working a little better now, Ron?
Yeah, there you go, Scott.
Great. Sorry about that, everybody. I'm not entirely sure what happened on my end. I think your question was about size of projects, and I guess I don't know that the size necessarily dictates where to start. I mean, hopefully the idea would be you can start at any of these places. And sometimes we give customers too many choices, but I think we're sort of at an all hands on deck kind of approach here. And, certainly Con Ed's got some resources to help you figure out what the right direction to go in. I mentioned Sustainable Westchester, there's the free screening, there's FlexTech. So, I think it's more about the customers, where they're at and their needs. I mean, I think generally what I tell people, if you know you want to do ground source heat pumps, contact somebody like Zach or Dave, and they can help you figure out how to do it. If you're not sure that's what you want to do, then that's where some of these other resources like Sustainable Westchester or Heat Smart Westchester and the free screening and FlexTech come into play to help you figure out what it is you do want to do and look at the alternatives.
Great. Zach, Dave, like what size, what size projects are you guys kind of where you start as opposed to a small, let's say less than 5,000 square foot residential, which I don't think is quite in your bailiwick. If it's 50,000 square foot residential, okay, maybe. But if you could just say sort of where you guys look at, obviously you do the larger commercial stuff.
Yeah, for Brightcore, from Brightcore's perspective, we're interested in projects that range approximately between 50,000 and 250,000 square feet per building.
And I would say from ZBF's perspective, what we found is projects under 50 to 75 tons make a lot of sense for us to do design builds. Projects over, 100 tons typically make sense for us to, help provide a design on and help implement because there's enough cost savings. The other thing you'll realize though is that, Dave and I work together on projects, and even though we're on different companies and different teams, it's a small industry, and whether, you give me a call and you want third-party ownership and we're not the right fit, we will put you in touch with whoever is the right fit. Because at the end of the day, I want to see people adopt the technology. So if someone calls me up and it's a 2 million square foot manufacturing facility, that's probably not in our alley, but we'll put you in touch with someone that has experience that can help you.
Folks, just so you know, these technologies, while, Zach and Dave specifically focus on the larger commercial pieces, all the way down to the residential, as Mark said, there are now opportunities and incentives as well. So there's, whether you're a solopreneur operating out of your house or have a smaller commercial operation or a small nonprofit, a church or whatever, all these technologies are potentially applicable, and there's ways to do it even if you don't have capital and can't take tax credits. So don't think that you're ruled out, and it's worth taking a look at if you're thinking about how to save money and how to reduce your carbon footprint. These are definitely critically important technologies and great opportunities from the small to the large. Let's see, I think we're closing down here. So let's just reiterate what's coming up next for everybody, and we'll see if there's anybody have any last questions, please shoot them over now. But next week is specifically on solar, on Sunrise Solar, which is a Westchester-based solar company, is going to talk about how you can get solar either with cash, no cash, how you combine solar with battery storage, how when you integrate solar into these projects and start doing heating and cooling as well, or electrification of vehicles, synergies that come out of that. And you can do it even if you can't put solar on your own property, either on your roof or on your grounds or as a carport over your parking lots, which are 3 areas. You can still access community solar no matter where you are in the Con Ed territory. It's also true actually in the other utility territories in New York State through community solar. If you are a property owner, you will also find out next week how you can rent your roof, rent your grounds, rent your parking lots get a lease from a community solar provider who will put the solar in, no cost to you, and you just get lease payments and get some solar savings. So that's next Wednesday, the 22nd. The following Wednesday, on August 5th, we'll be doing a combined Green Business Partnership Business Council webinar, specifically focused on electric vehicles. You'll identify a whole host of things that you may or may not know about electric vehicles, how they're cheaper to run. You can buy them cheaper now, depending upon the incentives and which vehicle you're looking at, how they're cheaper per mile on fuel, and how if you're also an owner of property and doing, let's say, solar carports or doing any type of solar, you should really consider putting in the charging infrastructure. There's now, as we mentioned, an additional $750 million available for charging infrastructure, and there's ways now to tap into that revenue, that expense that everybody is paying on gasoline. If you're a property owner, you can reduce people's costs by them switching to electric vehicles, and now you have a new revenue stream by providing the electric power as opposed to a gas station providing the fuel. And on August 12th, responsible investing and investing with green values and outperforming the market, where Pell Wealth Partners will be bringing in Calvert and a couple of other folks to talk about how you can actually get a better return on your investment, less risk by investing in these clean energy technologies and environmental, social, and governance, proper ESG investing that reduces your risk and improves your outcomes. And please remember, in September 18th, Friday, September 18th, the Business Council will be doing their energy conference. That was the one that was postponed from March. It's going to be a great event. It'll be interactive and live. And with that, I think we're done with the questions. Anyone have any last comments you want to make, gentlemen? Presenters?
Well, there was a quick question in the chat, Ron, that I'll take. Well, there's two actually. I'll take one of them and see if anybody else wants to take the other. So with the 100% Flex Tech offer that I mentioned, the question is, does the customer lay out cash up front? And if so, how much? And the answer is, we'll pay the first 50%, and it kind of depends on which consultant you use, but essentially that happens at the completion, during and at the completion of the study. We'll pay our half. And then we pay the second half once you have implemented the project. So you prove to us that you've installed the recommended measures in the study, and then we'll pay the other half. Hopefully that clarifies that question.
Then I guess I'm sorry that I missed it in the chat, but the ITC, the investment tax credit for Geo, Dave or Zach, you want to talk about how that works and what it is?
So 10% for commercial projects. For residential, through the rest of this year, it's 26%, and going down to 22% next year where it sunsets. But our industry is fighting hard to reinstitute the FTC, ITC for geothermal. So we're staying very hopeful that it goes back to 30 actually in 2024.
Great, thank you so much, Dave. With that, I think we're reaching the edge of our time. So I want to thank all the panelists and all the sponsors for their support of this clean energy series, and especially want to thank the Business Council and all the amazing staff, Amanda and John and Yvette, and thank you, Marcia, for all your amazing work. John?
Thank you, Ron. And I also want to thank our sponsors again, Atlantic Westchester, NYSERDA, Sunrise Solar, Pell Wealth Partners, Bright Score, and ZBF Geothermal. And a special thanks to Ron Kamen, the founder and CEO of Earthkind Energy Consulting, for putting on, again, another very important seminar in the BCW's Business Resource Center. As Ron has said a few times this afternoon, these some webinars are taped and they live on our Resource Center website, www.thebcw.org. So we encourage you to share them with your colleagues and other businesses that you feel really should be getting this type of information. And finally, as Ron said, we have rescheduled our BCW conference, which was scheduled in March. It's going to be a live virtual event on September 18th. Again, talking about the future energy landscape, talking about the new programs and renewables programs that are out there that we want our members to learn about, as well as continuing to make sure that we're asking the right questions as we move into 2021, and to make sure that we have enough power to continue the great work that is going to happen in Westchester County. On behalf of Marcia Gordon and our team at the BCW, we hope everyone remains safe and healthy, and we'll see you next Wednesday.
Thank you, John. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.